I'm just doing a little reading up on last night's political events. Of course, we talked about the Republican debate in the last segment of the program. 13 million viewers. Now, that is still better on average than just about any Republican debate from 2012. Newt Gingrich, and gosh, it seems like 100 years ago. Newt Gingrich, who was on TV yesterday with a massive scar on the left side of his cheek. I don't know what that was about. Mitt Romney, of course, a terribly exciting fellow. Santorum, still around back then. He's still with us this year. 13 million is better than anything they likely got 4 years ago, but it's still well below what some of the ratings had been when Donald Trump was the main attraction. This, of course, because Trump was 2 miles away holding a separate event at a university where he claims he has raised over $6 million for veterans charities. He has been criticized because one of those charities gives only 60 cents out of every dollar to veterans. But I think he's open as to who will be the recipient at this point. Trump speaking during the event last night, and he seems to have what you might call as usual, raucous group of supporters as he took a few jabs at Fox News.
And I have to go a little step further and say that Fox has been extremely nice, and the last number of hours, actually. And they've wanted me there, and they said, how about now? They called a few minutes ago. How about now? Can you come over? I said, hasn't it already started? And we actually thought what we'd do is we'd let them start, and, we wanted to be about 15 minutes into that hour so that by now they're all tuned in. Look at all the cameras, like the Academy Awards. This is like the Academy Awards. This is the Academy Awards. We're actually told that we have more cameras than they do by quite a bit, so that's sort of interesting. And you know what? That's really in honor of our vets, but they have been. They've been very nice, and they wanted me to go and apologize and everything else, and they did apologize, and they could not have been. But once this started, it's for our vets. There was nothing I could do.
Nothing I could do. And he said that with a huge grin on his face. You know what's going to happen now. Liberal media and all of the late night comics that are going to jump on board to his comment about this is like the Academy Awards. Yeah, he said it was like the Academy Awards. All white. That's what they'll be doing now, in other words, to try to discredit Donald Trump. I found something this morning as I was getting ready to go on the air. I don't like to read long snippets on radio. I find that just sitting here talking from the heart is a little bit easier than actually reading sentences, and I don't like people calling in and reading things back to me on the air. Most people, when we read aloud, we aren't necessarily Shakespearean actors. Let me put it that way. We don't necessarily have that skill. But every once in a while, I come across something, and it strikes me that perhaps the writer is onto something that a lot of people in media and even a lot of people in the Republican Party and the conservative media happen to be missing. Tucker Carlson, you know him as a host, of course, on weekends at Fox and Friends. Donald Trump is shocking, vulgar, and right. This is in today's edition of something called the Politico. I won't read all of it to you. It's somewhat lengthy. You can find it if you're looking for it. If you don't want to go to Politico and try to search through page after page, if you go to the website Real Clear Politics, there's a list of about a dozen at the top of the page, a dozen stories. This happens to be one of those stories. And he says, he exists because you failed, referring to Donald Trump. American presidential elections usually amount to a series of overcorrections. Clinton begat Bush, who produced Obama, whose lax border policies fueled the rise of Trump. In the case of Trump, though, the GOP shares the blame, and not just because his fellow Republicans misdirected their ad buys or waited so long to criticize him. Trump is in part a reaction to the intellectual corruption of the Republican Party. And then I flip a page here, and there's even more. Consider the conservative nonprofit establishment. I think he's talking about all those people who sit in Washington. National Review is a not-for-profit, and some people are now saying that its attack on Trump may have actually violated some laws governing not-for-profits. The writer says, which seems to imply most right-of-center adults in Washington, speaking of the nonprofits he is, over the past 40 years, how much donated money have all those think tanks and foundations consumed? Billions, certainly. And he said, has America become more conservative over that same period? Come on, most of us know that cash went to self-perpetuation. Salaries, bonuses, retirement funds, medical, dental, lunches, car services, leases on high-end office space, retreats in Mexico, more fundraising. Unless you were the direct beneficiary of any of that, you'd have to consider it wasted. We have a lot of people, we've heard these stories before, where people in medical research are criticized. They want the government funding to keep coming. They want donations from the public. They don't really want to find a cure. That's been one criticism. It may not be true, but it's been one criticism saying they really don't want to find a cure because then they'll all be out of jobs. And according to Tucker Carlson, that's the problem with a great many people in the conservative establishment. He says it's pretty embarrassing, and yet they're not embarrassed. Many of these same overpaid, underperforming, tax-exempt sinecure holders are now demanding that Trump be stopped. Why? Because, as his critics have noted in a rising chorus of hysteria, Trump represents, quote, an existential threat to conservatism, unquote. Carlson writes, conservative voters are being scolded for supporting a candidate they consider conservative because it would be bad for conservatism. And by the way, the people doing the scolding, they're the ones who've been advocating for open borders and nation building in countries whose populations hate us, and trade deals that eliminated jobs while enriching their donors, all while implicitly mocking the base for its worries about abortion and gay marriage and the pace of demographic change. Now they're telling their voters to shut up and obey, and if they don't, they're liberal. The party had no idea who its voters were or what they believed. The only Republicans they talked to read the Wall Street Journal, too. Closed a system, they really didn't know what people outside of it wanted. And he goes on to say, they have no idea what you're going through. They can't understand why illegal immigration is a problem for you because, hey, the people who come work for them do the work for under the table for less than minimum wage, and they don't know what you're going through because you lost those jobs. He says truth is not only a defense, it's thrilling. This is another reason he says people are supporting Trump. When was the last time you stopped yourself from saying something you believe to be true for fear of being punished for criticized for saying it? You know, in this day and age, you can't go on the radio and say, I oppose same-sex marriage, without somebody calling for your head and demanding the end of your job. Because it's claimed then that you're a bigot and a hater and that you shouldn't be employed in media. Believe me, I've dealt with things like this over the course of the last dozen years of my life. The writer says a temporary ban on Muslim immigration. He says the conservatives in the establishment say that sounds extreme. But is it? Millions of Muslims have moved to Western Europe over the past 50 years, and a sizable number of them still haven't assimilated. Instead, they remain hostile and sometimes dangerous to the cultures that welcome them. By any measure, that is, experiment has failed. What's our strategy for not repeating it here? They've got none. They just say, well, we have to be compassionate and we have to allow this, and this is good for America. And even though there's no actual evidence of it, diversity makes us stronger. They keep throwing you all of those bromides. Why? Because they're the beneficiaries. You aren't. Think about that. I'll put it this way. George Will, Charles Krauthammer, Rich Lowry, who never did an honest day's work in his life, they're all very well paid and well fed, and they live in big houses. 9:15, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Trump wasn't finished. He took a jab at Jeb Bush while he was on the stage at his event last night.
But you know, you look at a guy like Jeb Bush, he's taking 100 low energy. He's taking 120 extremely low. Oh, I shouldn't say it. He's debating right now. Maybe he's doing great. He's probably looking for me. He's saying, has anyone seen Trump? Why? Where's Trump? Where is he? Where is he? Yeah. Jeb, he's taking $128 million. People that I know, killers, like him, killers. They put up $5 million, $2 million, $8 million. They're lobbyists, they're special interests. They're not doing that for their health. And whenever we have a problem, you know, a lot of times, I was telling the other day, because I know most of the lobbyists, I mean, I've used them. I was on the other side. 7 months ago, I was on the other side. I was a big giver. But I know these people. And I said, believe me, when they put in 6 million, 5 million, 1 million, they're not just doing it. They want something for it.
Of course they do. Jeb Bush, you look at the guy, and I have to say this, you shouldn't feel sorry for a guy. Speaking of people who live in big houses and never have to worry about where their next meal's coming from. But you have to feel a little sorry for him because he seems to be a decent fellow, He seems to perhaps be the smartest of all of the Bush children, at least those of his generation. And yet, you look at him and there's just something about him, and you say to yourself, I pity him. And there's no fire there. And I can't imagine him as much of a leader. You know, somebody that he talks like he's on Prozac continuously. 917, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. Pat Buchanan asking today if the Republican Party will unite if Trump is the nominee. And he said, will they go away from the Republican Party, or will they actually come together if he is not the nominee? And he says all of these so-called conservatives who are bashing him, he pretty much echoes exactly what Tucker Carlson echoed. They have a complete lack of understanding of what most of the Americans they claim to represent actually go through in their daily lives. He says there is a deeper conflict. Millions of conservatives and independents believe it was the Republican policies of the recent past that also failed America. The Bush, Clinton, Obama trade policies produced the $12 trillion in trade deficits, which measures the net export of U.S. factories and manufacturing jobs, which explain the wage stagnation. In short, it will be difficult for populists to unite to win the Beltway conservatives when the former see the latter as part of the problem, not the solution. I'll say this. After looking through some of these things this morning, a lot more people seem to be at least coming around to the thought that, if nothing else, what Trump has done, and we've talked about this, I think, to some length before, but what he has definitely done is he has so upset the apple cart and the comfort zone of these people that it was necessary. It was necessary for someone to finally come along and just take a foot and give them a big kick right square in the back end. Coming up on 919, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. We've got more coming up. And I was mentioning earlier, if we get a chance, I'd like to talk a little bit about how these people are so out of touch. And the economy did not grow in the fourth quarter of last year. I mean, it has stalled. It is dead. It is just treading water now at this point. And I guess the point we'd like to make about all of this, they live in that Beltway bubble in Washington, and everything's fine for them. They have all the finest clothes. They drive the latest automobiles. Most of those have foreign labels on them. Heck, even Buchanan in the 90s was driving a Mercedes. When he was questioned about it, he pointed out it was a better automobile than what he could get otherwise. That infuriated some people in the labor movement. But then again, if you drive a Ford, a Chevy, or a Dodge, most of the parts for all of those are manufactured somewhere else. The only jobs left here are the people who are actually just putting the parts together, and they're working at far less than what they used to get. I'm telling you, the signs in the economy are not good at the moment, and things could get a little scary by the time we get to Election Day. 920, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. It's 34. Also, if we get a chance, got to tell you the latest environmental news as well.